Iran under pressure. China backing down. And behind it all, Donald Trump. Was this his plan all along? From nuclear threats to trade wars, we break down how Trump's bold strategy is shaking up the world stage. Get ready, this is the side of U.S. foreign policy they don't want you to see.
Let's bring in Dr. Rebecca Grant, Senior Fellow at the Lexington Institute. Dr. Grant, are you surprised, first of all, that the Iranians even agreed to these talks?
Yes, and congratulations to Steve Witkoff. It has been years since there were real direct talks, and the reason is pretty clear. As the White House has said, all the options are not only on the table, they're all deployed to the Middle East. Somewhere between 4 and 6 B-2 stealth bombers forward in Diego Garcia, 2 aircraft carriers. That has really gotten Iran's attention, and they know that Trump has a battle plan if he needs it. Iran either has to talk or get their nuclear facilities bombed.
Well, the president, famously said many times during his first term that there were no new wars started while he was president, 45. Would he start one with Iran?
I think that he will carry out strikes if he has to, but clearly what he's hoping for, and it's working, is to get Iran to talk. He tried really hard to do that during his first term. He and some of the G7 even offered immediate cash to Iran, but nothing would bring them to the table. And now they realize that with the situation with what Israel has done to Hamas and Hezbollah, Iran being contained and hemmed in by U.S. forces as well, that now they really need to talk, or they risk more instability in Iran itself. And that seems to have been critical in getting the Iranian foreign minister to show up in Oman and actually start these talks, which will take a while, but they've started.
General Jack Keane, our Fox News military analyst, says that Iran has to believe that the president means business here. Listen.
Look, our positions are about as far apart as they can be. The reasons why the Iranians are actually talking, because the supreme leader did not want to engage in any discussion whatsoever, is because I think they've come to the conclusion that the president is dead serious about supporting an Israeli-led, U.S.-supported strike on Iran to take down their nuclear enterprise if they don't voluntarily dismantle it.
Interesting what he said there, an Israeli-led U.S.-supported strike on Iran. So clearly we're communicating with the Israelis about our intentions here.
Well, General Keane is absolutely right, and I think how it would unfold, so they want Iran to know this. Remember, Israel took out a lot of Iran's air defenses last year. Then you have 2 carriers, U.S. land-based fighters in the region to continue to work the air defenses and defend our forces. And then, like I said, B-2 bombers and more available that are able to use massive ordnance-penetrating weapons and get at those underground facilities. So that's the threat display. And remember, John, there's no reason for Iran to enrich their own uranium. They're within perhaps a week of enriching enough to have a bomb. They don't need it for nuclear power. They can buy it on the global market like everybody else. So it is time for them to start to make a deal. And I think maybe due to our military pressure and Trump's resolve, they're beginning to realize it. And I think the pieces are falling into place.
The former Secretary of State says the Iranians have to behave. Let's listen to Mike Pompeo.
We have to fully, verifiably eliminate their nuclear weapons program for there to be any agreement. And I see no evidence that the Iranians have any intention of doing that. And I see no intention that they are willing to stop behaving badly all across the world. All we ask is that they behave like a normal nation, and there is no indication they're prepared to do that.
So if they're not prepared to do that, Dr. Grant, it seems like explosions might be heard in Tehran or elsewhere.
Well, that's what Witkoff and others are going to have to figure out. I think there's a prospect of getting some agreement. It's going to have to include real inspections. It's going to have to include them giving up, frankly, some of that enriched uranium. They know they're not going to want to do that. And then there'll have to be some limits on their ballistic missile development. But there's no question that the military situation in the Middle East has turned to the point where now Iran is at risk at home. Their president seems to understand that. That's why they went to negotiate. And I hope that we'll be able to really see some forward progress. But the pressure has to stay on. Iran is awfully tricky.
Yeah, it sounds like the mullahs are going to have a tough pill to swallow coming out of these negotiations. All right, Dr. Rebecca Grant, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Issa joining me now to talk about this. You just heard Mr. O'Leary. He is, he wants to play the hardest of hardball with China. What do you make of what the president has done this week? Still focused on China with these tariffs as the rest of the world gets a little bit of a break right now. Your thoughts?
Well, I think no president in history has the perspective that President Trump has. He negotiated and worked with Xi in the first Trump administration, and he saw him keep none of those deals. He has seen for decades China keep none of those deals. And as Kevin said, whether it's 140 or it's 240 or it's 440%, we have to show them that we're willing to buy nothing in return for making them come to the table, not and make promises, but keep promises. President Trump is known for one thing. Promises he makes, he keeps. Xi is known as one of those, and China, as one of those countries that'll promise anything, including ending global warming, doing all this stuff. Judge them based on what they've done, which is cheat, not based on what they've done, which is promise. That's what President Trump now is in the process of doing, is making him come to the table and keep promises.
Yeah, and as we look at politics, Kevin kind of talked about this a little bit. The President Trump, yourself, all of Congress, there are midterms in which everyone has to answer to the people. She's in a little bit of a different circumstance, but still has to answer to his people more broadly. How much of an effect do the looming midterms, which are still quite a ways away, and we've seen how much changes with this administration already on a week-to-week basis, how much does that play into this going forward?
Well, for President Trump, not at all. For Republicans, I think very little. The fact is, we made promises to the American people. They swept our Senate in. They swept the president in by a clear majority, a landslide historically. And that means we have a mandate to do what we promised to do. So as long as we're doing what we promised to do, I don't care when the election is, we're willing to face the voters and say, it may not be a smooth road, but it's the road you asked us to take. We've closed the problems at the border. We're cleaning up crime. We're bringing down inflation. And most importantly, we're dealing with problems that have been around for decades, and one after another president has sort of pushed them along, managed them. You don't manage China. You get China to keep their promises. You don't manage Iran. You get Iran to get rid of their nukes. The list around the world that President Trump promised to deal with, and he's dealing with, is exactly why we're looking forward to those midterms, but between now and then, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I want to squeeze in one more topic, because you had a busy, week in Washington. We had this budget framework. You and your colleagues in the House managed to pass this week. It was pretty tight. About a dozen House conservatives that, initially they had their opposition receiving some assurances that things are moving forward. There were other things happening as well. The SAVE Act. What were the highlights for you? What should people look at? And what about the criticism from the Democrats that the Republicans doing all of this look a little bit chaotic?
Well, first of all, the highlight for me was NORA, the bill that reins in rogue judges that passed out of the House. Big win, because it's time for us to do what every administration should want, which is the ability to have some consistency of their executive orders being properly executed and not blocked by some one of 677 judges around the country, many of them very ideologically driven. But, you went back to the budget deal. Look, we had a disagreement. The disagreement was the minimums. The minimum from the House is $1.5 trillion. The minimum from the Senate was like $5 billion. But, after we defined that the minimum is just that, the House is comfortable that we're not going to do $5 billion in spending cuts. We're going to do $500 billion or $1 trillion. And the Senate's going to have to realize that we're serious about cutting the deficit, about cutting wasteful government, just as DOGE is, the House is. As a matter of fact, much of DOGE's now significant hundreds of billions of dollars of savings, we're going to make those permanent.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Great point about the No Rogue Rulings Act. You're, of course, one of the authors there. And then House Speaker Mike Johnson, I'll just point out, he said that you all are committed to finding at least $1.5 trillion in savings for the American people. So, Congressman, thank you so much for bringing us your insights, giving us a little bit of your time on this Saturday morning. We greatly appreciate it.